What is up, fellow anti-netters, friends, and people curious about what it is like to actually use a physical knowledge development system for developing and evolving thought? Today I'm going to do another video on how I am actually writing and producing output using an analog Zettelkasten. We're going to do this one in a first-person perspective, and that is going to allow me to spend a little bit more time and detail showing you the individual notes and the whole process for how one actually takes knowledge that has been developed from reading and research and then organizes an outline into a book and then writes each individual section within a book. So let's kick things off. Now, before I do kick things off, I realize that it's still kind of hard to grasp what an Antinet actually is. And so I'm going to first give you an overview of what this thing actually is. And a lot of people think that by Antinet, I mean that it's anti-digital and anti-internet. And that's kind of tongue-in-cheek. I like that name because, well, to a large degree, it is saying that, but not really. Antinet stands for something. ANTI. The ANTI stands for the 4 principles Luhmann outlined in his paper on communicating with note boxes. And if you haven't read it yet, if you just search online, I've got some printouts of it here, but it's essentially the de facto standard and I would say first principle that one should use when thinking about Zettelkasten systems. For some reason, it is often ignored and people have morphed the term Zettelkasten into something which it really is something that its creator, Niklas Luhmann, would probably not recognize today. What he would recognize is what I call the Antinet. And the Antinet is founded on his 4 principles, which use the ANTI acronym. Those 4 principles are as follows. Number 1, analog. Number 2, a numeric alpha address, meaning on each and every single note card he put a numeric alpha, or I call it numeral alphic, which is just a funny way of combining the two things, address in the top right corner. So that's the N in Antinet. So analog, numeric, alphic, whatever, numeral alphic, whatever. Okay, I'm even confusing myself in the terminology at this point. Tree, meaning you see how there's dashes in between, or slashes, you should call it. It allows it to branch and stem, right? It's a tree-like structure. That's the T. And the I. The I is the index. The index allows you to map and look up words like contribution, give, right? Or cross, Christ, 1717/6. And if I go to 1717/6 in my tree of knowledge, my Antinet, I will be able to find cross or Christ, right? So 17:7-6. So the Holy Rood or cross is a Christian relic, physical remains of a piece of the cross Jesus was crucified on, referred by Joseph Campbell, The Tree of Redemption. This was in A Hero with a Thousand Faces, a book that I read, right? So think of all the cards, and in the top right address, it's like an XY coordinate, right? When you want to go to a place, you don't think of the XY coordinate, you think of the human readable place or the name, and that's what the index is. So analog, numeric alpha, tree, index. That is what an Antinet is. Now this thinking system combined into creating something that Luhmann called almost like a ghost-like entity in a box. Okay, I'm not going to get into that now. That's actually the section that I am giving a broad overview on in the book I am writing. Now, yesterday I shot a little video and I was at like 14,000 words. Right now I'm at like 16,000 words, and I worked maybe like 2 hours, if that, today. So the reason that that is important and worth mentioning, how freaking much content you can bust out with such a tool as an Antinet, is because that is used as one of the primary selling points. If you go on Zettelkasten.de, or even just use it on, or look it up on Wikipedia, the prolific writing and the quote publication machine that Lumen was, as called by Johannes Schmidt, was its ability to essentially bust out content like this. And that's something that seems to be forgotten in the land of digital Zettelkasten fanboys and people out there who seem to occupy their time with just creating more notes and linking them together in cool looking bubble graphs, when in actuality the whole point of this thing is to be a thinking system that allows you to generate and create genius level work, and do so on a prolific, insane basis. So with that preamble out of the way, here's what I'm going to show you. What I've done over the past 8 months is, I haven't read all of these books, but this is what I've set aside to research for the book I'm writing on the Antinet. Now, I've read several of these books, and the process that I've talked about and covered in another video is something I'm not going to cover at length right now. It essentially is that over the past 8 months, I would read a book like Human Memory, and I would take notes, right? And there's a specific way of taking notes, and Lumen outlined this. Now, the 3 types of notes that I use and will be writing about and teaching are excerpt notes, which are, you can actually write quotes of the things that you read that you later want to reference and include in your writing. And that's a myth that Johannes Schmidt seems to have carried forth, and really created kind of a crap storm, because a lot of people think that Lumen did not write down quotes, and in fact he did. Even in his second Zettelkasten, he did. The second type of notes are like observation notes. When you notice something and they're really brief, observation notes can be even written in the margins. And for excerpt notes and observation notes, I like to write them on 3x5 cards because it forces me to be very concise. And then the last type of notes, which is what I would say RNs calls permanent notes, but really they're not really permanent notes, because everything is permanent in a Zettelkasten, or really an Antinet. Not really a Zettelkasten, because a digital Zettelkasten, not really anything's permanent, it seems like these days. But in a physical Zettelkasten, which is an Antinet, you write reflection notes. And these are the 4x6 notes where you kind of reflect and write as if you are writing and publishing this content, or to have it published in a book. Now, over the course of 8 months, my notes and this simple practice and this simple workflow of doing that has morphed and created this big section, which is 4214, as you can see, which is my section on the Zettelkasten, the Antinet. And during the course of these 8 months, I do something. When you're writing, you start to notice patterns and concepts. And what you do is you create inside this section, its own table of contents or index. Now, this table of contents is emergent. It emerges over time, and it emerges over this previous 8 months. So for instance, in this first section, and Lumen had these as well, these sectional collectives, I call them. Inside these sectional collectives, you'll see like there's Zettelkasten as the section. There's the definition of Zettelkasten, which is at 4214/0. Zettelkasten numbering schemes, 4214/1. Neuro-imprinted Lumen examples. That means the examples that I've written of Lumen's notes by hand to stamp it onto my mind and understand what Lumen actually did. And you can just see this and go down the list. Now, over 8 months, I've been logging these, and this has grown, right? The only problem with all of this is that it is not in a very concise and clear and organized structure. You know, this just emerged over time. And that's good because it's not as if I had a preconceived notion for what I wanted to write. It's almost like you let your reading and research do the surfacing of knowledge and key insights for you. Now, I have about 8, or I think 9 of these sectional collectives, okay? What I did after I got to a certain point, which is as of several weeks ago, is I took all of these emergent sectional collectives, this index, right? And then I wrote each individual one on 3x5 index cards. What I did next was I organized those 3x5 index cards to create the outline, the table of contents for my book. What you are looking at right here is the more ordered version of those unordered emergent sectional collectives that I just showed you. Now, these ordered little things, as you can see, are going to map to my book. Okay, so I'm going to go through it and show you some of them right now. So at the start of my book, it's going to be like, what's the point? Why? Why a book on Zettelkasten? The myths of Zettelkasten. As you can see to the right of each one, there is then the numeric alpha address pointing me to where in my Antinet I can find the answers to this information, right? The myths of Zettelkasten, reliable sources, unreliable sources, confusing new people, highlighting, let's see, why, part 2, why Luhmann started his Antinet, why is it even important to learn, you know? Under this, I have this section, which is about Nicholas Luhmann, his achievements, Luhmann the man, Luhmann the troll, with his examples of him trolling people, Luhmann the Nazi, which a lot of people don't yet even realize. And yes, he technically was a Nazi because he was conscripted as a child soldier to serve and forced to serve for the Nazis. More on this later. Then I have the myths of Zettelkasten. And then I have notes, like why notes, why even important, what is a note? Notes as leaves, notes as neurons, that's like metaphors for notes. And I'm going to go a little bit fast through this next stuff because I think you get the point. Okay, this is how I've laid out my book. Now, the beautiful part is, and kind of the scary part is, it's almost like you will create so much freaking content and your books will just explode, where it's like writer's block isn't even a thought or an option. It's like you almost find yourself wanting to slow down. It's really an amazing writing experience. And what I mean by this is the part in the section that I'm writing right now is the section of what is an Antinet. Now, when I wrote this section, which is 16,000 words and counting, it's insane because those 16,000 words just came from grabbing 4214/0, okay? And and I also grabbed the section 4214/4 and 5, okay? And by grabbing just 4214/0, like this, it starts from here, and you can see what Luhmann wrote. He said, you need a system that can internally evolve and grow infinitely, okay? So here's 4214/0, and it ends, see, there's 4214/0b. This is infinite expansion, if you can see the numbers, right? It stops right here. So, like, I pulled out this swath, this huge swath of cards, and I didn't even use all of it either, you know, because I was like, okay, this is irrelevant. I don't want to write about this right now. But then what I did, and as I showed in the second video, or in the last video, is I laid some of these cards out, and I then organized this section to write the What is an Antinet chapter, okay? So this, so far, has produced, like, well, wherever it started. This, so far, right here, has produced 16,000 words in my manuscript of my book, which is insane, because I've got quite a lot left to do. Now, what I'm not arguing for is quantity of words. I'm, of course, arguing for quality of words. And the beautiful part about doing this and writing and organizing and working with a thinking system like an Antinet is that a lot of these ideas, they've ruminated and evolved, over 8 months. So instead of just coming up with an idea and writing about it instantly, I get to write about 8 months worth of the evolution of that idea, and can even see where maybe I may have made a mistake in my thinking. And then you can evolve that mistake by adding more cards behind it, and even write about that mistake and that thinking for your readers. Okay, so with that said, I want to show you the next section I'm writing. This section falls within the What is an Antinet section. And it's the last part of my brief overview of what is an Antinet section. And it entails the concept of a second mind. Luhmann called his a communication partner or a ghost in the box. Now, so what I've just done is I basically took those cards and I have organized them into my section on the second mind. And so here's the first section of this, you can call it section of the chapter, okay? It's going to be called, and this is what I did, the ghost of the second mind. The ghost of the second mind is already essentially written for me. I, of course, have to write it out and type it out and make it even make more sense, right? But it's already written for me, and each card, as you can see, has references and footnotes included in it already. All I have to do to include those references and those quotes is simply I have Zotero, the reference manager, to the left of my writing screen, as you can see. Let me pull this up. Over here, so whenever I want to reference something, all I do is type into Zotero, like Cevellini, and boom. I do Command-Shift-A to copy, and if I want to footnote it, I just add the footnote, right? Boom, and then you can just add it there. If I had 3 hands, I would add it there, but it's kind of hard to do. I mean, I could probably just show you how I do it right now. Where is it? Markup, add a footnote. So there's a footnote, right, in, what is it called? In Ulysses. So just paste it in, and if you can see, and then just add the page number. Boom. And that's it. So it's already kind of written for me. And all I do is write it. So that's that section, the ghost of the second mind. As you can see, it starts with, when you peruse and read the thoughts of someone who has passed, it's almost as if there's a ghost-like quality to it, a ghost-like quality to reading another's thoughts in their own handwriting. Yet, with you and your Antinet, it's done while you're alive. It enables you to peruse and observe your own thoughts, to communicate with yourself in an inner or internal dialogue fashion. John Locke realized the advantages of such. It carried the possibility of him reading it in the future as a historical record of his thinking, allowing him to observe why and where he was wrong. That's from the knowledge scientist Yeo on page 149, and I'll just look that up in my reference manager and cite it. Then, what I've decided to do is after I write about that, I'm going to write about this. And this kind of plays into when you peruse the thoughts of someone who has passed. And this came from Johannes Schmidt's paper on Nicholas Luhmann's Zettelkasten. He wrote, in the sense of the 2 properties outlined, and I guess I referenced that other card, the Antinet is, quote, more than just an analog database of Luhmann's theory. Schmidt then likens it to the backstage of Luhmann's grand theory of scholarly work, and therefore as Nicholas Luhmann's intellectual autobiography. I've information behind that of other scholars. So modern day scientists agree with Luhmann's notion of a mind in the box, or ghost in a box, emerging from Antinets, and not just as information analog store. Quote, the effectiveness of this machine does not, quote, quote, To argue the familiarity or the filing cabinet simply stores records would be to give a too short and therefore misleading description of the interplay of user and machine, the Antinet-like machine. I then have another section here, the concept of the internal ghost or specter, which Luhmann called it, and inner monologue has been observed and studied by scholars as the interaction between, number one, external memory, like the Antinet, and internal memory, the memory biologically inside your skull. After studying John Boyle, John Locke, and Robert Hooke, the researcher found that, quote, annotations are stored in the external memory can function only in tandem with internal memory. So excerpts and notes prompt recollection of more than what they actually contain. And that's where that internal dialogue takes place in your own mind, right? I then go into this section after that. And this section is the mind-body problem, the duality of the Antinet. And it goes into that type of content. Then I go have this type of content. You want a second mind, not a second brain. And I read about this type of content. Now, I want to show you something. I did this as an experiment, and I'm probably never going to do it on an ongoing basis, is just to check it out. I printed out a tweet that I wrote, and I filed it in my own Antinet. Now, this is actually has some benefits, which I'm not going to get into too much detail into right now, but it's called external context. It allows you to kind of memorize like the position of certain ideas based on weird looking cards. Like this is a weird looking card. And whenever I stumble across it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's like about not wanting a second brain, but a second mind. And that's what this section is and entails, right? So at least maybe that shows you an example of like, you don't have to have everything be absolutely insanely perfect. You can experiment, just don't delete, evolve it. And that's the benefit of really physical and analog systems. Let's see here. Here's the next section, the problems of trying to explain a second mind. And then I get into how Nicholas Luhmann used communication theory, and also how Luhmann himself said that it takes a number of years for one to even experience the emergence of a second mind. And then I cap it off with a summary. As crazy as it sounds, ... and some other kind of last things that I want to say, of like the aspects of it. And then this is just like the final thing that I want to say on it before I close the section. And so, like I outlined yesterday, it's really simple. All I do is I start section by section. So I'll pull out this card, put it over here to my left, look down at it, and write. And the benefit of doing this, of rewriting it, is that a lot of the things that I write, you have to, like some of the things that I read, I'm like, what am I even talking about here? And then it forces me to kind of relearn, re-get in the context, and then better explain it to the reader by rewriting it in a more clearer way right here. Now, of course, once it gets right here, like I've got 16,000 words, a lot of it is going to be edited down and simplified even more. But the core basis is already formed, and it's formed through a very rudimentary system, and a system kind of like the laws of physics or thermodynamics. It's founded on very simple principles, very simple things, but if you just keep repeating it and doing it and not trying to skip out and take the easy way and automate it with workflows and templates and all these distractions, if you do it the hard way and neuro imprint it in your mind by actually writing by hand, it actually morphs into what the Antinet and what the Zettelkasten was actually supposed to do. And that is to develop thought, develop the mind, and become a publication machine. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video, this first-person account of what it's like working with an Antinet, and cannot wait to share with you the content, the book, and probably will be sharing with you this material in the meantime, or at least in article form. So stay tuned, and thank you very much. And like, subscribe, share, and help me to really grow this channel, because I'm having a lot of fun doing it. All right, peace and love, Antinetters, friends, and those curious about what it's like working with a physical thinking development system. Peace and love. Bye-bye now.